Well, I'm hoping this all works out. All right. We are retesting and trying to get this all set up here for what you see as the afternoon meeting. And haven't had a chance to get on and do a live stream in a very long time. Just needed to hear my audio coming back there to make sure that everything is totally locked in and good to go. So we're gonna get on. We're gonna get on Facebook here, and we're going to post some advisories that we have a live stream in progress. Over to the REC Networks page, and we will set up for we will set up there. Very good. And because of the subject matter, I think we will go over to LPFM Solidarity. Come on. Oh, because I'm still in the REC account. That's why. Good old silliness here. Because, we want to talk about a few things here. So we're going to wait until see if we get any viewers that come in, and so we can get this live stream meeting started. As you can see, we're back up and running with a decent set here. Spent the last few days here doing a little bit of interior decorating. Let's see if we can bring this in without. Okay, so there it is. All right, we're going to try to get this down somewhere where hopefully we can get our audio more into the yellow there, so that way the world can hear us, and without there being a big, huge microphone in the way. Of course, always looking for feedback in regards to the audio quality, because we're testing something right now. It's kind of like when they're filming a movie. When you're watching a movie, you never see the mic boom come into the movie like this, and so I want to try to achieve that, and so hopefully the microphone is picking up well, and we're all looking good there. Feel free to jump in the chat if you want to check in, so that way we know who's watching, and we'll leave. We're gonna do this with we're gonna just do this with open Q&A throughout. And this is more of an informal discussion. Again, it's just I have not been doing live streams or even any kind of content creation of any kind lately. There's just been a lot going on, and it's time for the Michi to to catch up with the rest of you all. And there's William. Thank you. Welcome to the welcome aboard. Yeah, you can see the set looks good. Yes. Just had some, just these last couple weeks, those last couple months actually have been busy. In April, I was at NAB, and did the NAB show this year. Actually, I haven't talked about this publicly on in person, but we had a little history happen, and something that I don't think that the low power FM community had ever seen coming, and that is one of the major LPFM advocates slash stakeholders who these days I consider people like Petri Dish, Paul Bain, Will Floyd, Todd Urich, and some of the others, folks of those caliber as the major stakeholders where it comes to the advocacy portion of LPFM. And we've always had this. There's always been this animosity towards the LPFM service from the NAB. But the nice part about it is in the past couple years, I've been making some strides in trying to increase, to try to raise the awareness and try to mend that bridge that was actually burnt on the NAB side, and I'm here trying to repair some of the bridge. Now, of course, I have diplomatic relations with the NAB. If I've got concerns, I will get on the phone and call my contacts at NAB. If they have concerns, they call me. This has gone both ways in the past couple of years on things. We saw that come to play with a couple of years ago with the EAS, with the required upgrades, and where it came to the delay that Sage Alerting Systems had with getting their Rev 96 software out. That was an issue. Actually, that was an issue that started. That issue actually started on the Radio for People call. And that's where I was originally made aware of that. That's a very community radio, very LPFM, independent NCE call that I attend once a month. And I mean, I already had a relationship going with NAB, and so obviously because I was the one with the NAB relationship, I went ahead and volunteered and said, look, I will reach out to NAB. And the funny part about that one was that at first they didn't believe me. They thought I was bullshitting them, that there was an issue with the Sage being delayed. And a couple days later they said, yeah, we've verified it is a problem. It's the first time that REC Networks and the NAB had ever done any kind of a joint filing with the FCC, and that was to get this extension for Sage users. I also asked for it for digital alert systems because of the issues with the older DASDEC units that could not take the 5.x upgrades, and a lot of stations, especially television stations, still had very archaic DASDECs equipped in their stations, and we needed to make sure that that they got through. The FCC did allow the those with the aged out DASDECs to request waivers, so we got that. We just didn't get a blanket like we got with the Sage. So just in April, I was actually approached by both NAB and the Society of Broadcast Engineers, SBE, for which the latter I'm a member of, because they were working on the self-inspection guides for LPFM. They already did one for FM. They did one for TV. and they were going to be doing one for LPFM. And and actually, we talked about that in the previous year's NAB. I was in the audience at the SBE's presentation and the joint NAB SBE presentation on the self-inspection guides for FM. And and I said, look, I'll be more than happy to collaborate with you all on the version for LPFM. Well, there were some complications. I'll just say that, but eventually, I was made aware that that they were getting ready to publish a version for LPFM, and one of the things that I was able to do was I was asked to be on a panel at the April NAB show. And basically a similar panel to what we had the previous year, which was a joint SBE NAB panel on the self-inspection guides. And so, yeah, this was the very first time that I'm aware of that any of the major LPFM stakeholders, and remember who I mentioned, anybody, and really just anything that was very pro LPFM, was able to get on a stage at the NAB. That was a huge accomplishment on our part. And so I'm really happy that that happened. Now, in May, I was I went to the DC section of the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers, SEMPTE, and had a talk with them. And we talked about changes in the TV regulations, especially now with the, especially with everything going on in the Carr administration. TV is getting a lot of attention. ATSC 3.0. The NAB wants to mandate a transition of everybody to NAB to ATSC 3.0, the next gen TV. And of course, the huge problem with that is that there's very few ATSC3 compatible receivers out on the market right now. And those who are the early adopters were experiencing and still experience issues with digital rights management. And so that's a big issue right now among the television hobby crowd, I guess you could call them. And we can, and such like that. So, the NAB wanted the markets for, the top markets to go in 2028 and everybody else to go in 2030. And of course, I'm objecting to that, saying, there's very few stations that have actually made the transition already. And, that kind of a rush schedule, that's going to have a huge consumer impact. That's going to have a huge impact on smaller TV stations. So, that's of course been a big issue. Also, there's also another group that wants to do, they want to take a good chunk of a 6 megahertz television channel, and instead of using it for television and ATSC3 kind of, television and stuff, they want to use it for 5G data. And they want to use it for one-way 5G data. And that is actually pretty interesting. And my position on that is as long as the signal still carries at least a standard definition ATSC3 television channel, if they want to use the rest of the bandwidth, they want to use the rest of their 6 megahertz channel for something else, be my guest. That's what I could see here. Let's see. LSG, quick question. What should I do? What should I do about what? Let me know. So that happened. Honestly, not a lot. We went through a pretty dead period over here after all that. We have, there's obviously a lot of concerns right now because of the NPR PBS situation, and with the current administration wanting to defund NPR and such. And, there's the rescission bill that's out there right now to try to cut the CPB funding altogether. There's been a lot of seesawing and roller coastering on the next generation warning system related issues. And, that seems to be changing. There's just so much uncertainty right now. It is sad what kind of uncertainty is going right now, where it comes to that. So, besides that, and let's see, this past month, I actually took a couple of days. I took a couple of vacation days. And a lot of times when I'm out, we go into minimal operations, we go into reduced operations. Each one has a different definition. It all depends on the reasoning for me being out, and it will usually give us an idea of how many hours I might be available in the day to work on something. If it's a reduced day, then that means I'm probably going to be around for a portion of the day to work on things. But if it's minimal operation, then I'm probably not going to be around most of the day. And we have to, and obviously what I do is I say, look, if you want anything, just send me an email. And if there's something I can do, or if there's systems, if I'm able to get to systems, we can do that. This past week or two, we've had extremely hot temperatures here in Riverton, especially last week. I literally had to close the room up here at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon because it was, we were having temperatures in the hundreds here. And this room, the air conditioning doesn't work too well up here. And I've got 2 fans blowing on me. You could probably see the fan blowing onto the t-shirts in the back behind me. And so that's where we're at on, so yeah, so it's been some fairly quiet times here, but during those 2 days off, I actually did do something very fun. I first went to a minor league ball game. I went to go see the Chesapeake Bay Sox play the Altoona Curve. This is Double A Eastern League teams. The Bay Sox is the Double A for the Orioles, and the Curve is the Double A for the Pirates, the Pittsburgh Pirates. So it was an interesting game, and the Curve won. And before I went, some people were telling me, you've got to learn. I know you're going to the Bay Sox Stadium, but you've got to learn the Curve fight song, and it is a very catchy little tune. Baseball, everybody loves Curve baseball. Okay, so, if I ever get to Altoona, Pennsylvania, I will definitely be looking to go to Curve games. It sounds like they have a lot of fun. That's the other thing too, is that even at the Bay Sox game, it was a very small crowd because there was rain happening. The game did not get delayed at all, but it was raining, especially as we were getting into the 8th and 9th innings. It was raining, and they were able to complete the game. By the time I got to the car, it was coming down like a mother. We had pretty nasty weather to drive, and I still wanted to get some food, so I had to go find food out and then head back to the hotel room, which is like right across the street from the stadium. And then what I do is, then the next day Okay, let's go to the next day. Next day, I went to Washington, D.C., and this was not for FCC business. This was for fun business. I went to go see the Savannah Bananas. Those who know me personally, they know that I idolize Jesse Cole, who is the founder and president of Fans First Entertainment and the Savannah Bananas and the whole Banana Ball franchise because of what they do. It's right in their name, Fans First. It's a game where the fans get involved. And it's more, there's meet and greets, there's all kinds of great entertainment. Now people say, oh yeah, baseball, Banana Ball is a circus, it's Harlem Globetrotters, it's all that shit. Okay, the sideshow antics that take place, yeah, that's all choreographed, that's all staged. But the gameplay itself is real. There's no staging in the gameplay. It's not like the Washington Generals. It's not like, where the Globetrotters always win and the Washington Generals always lose. It's not like, the Bananas always win and the party animals, or in this case, the firefighters, always lose. That's not the case. The gameplay is real. Actually, the party animals, who are the primary nemesis team to the Bananas, is actually doing better than the Bananas. Their record is better. And that's playing against the Bananas mostly. So, yeah, tell me that's a fixed game. So, that's what I had to do. Obviously, LSG did not come back to tell me what he wants to do. All right, so let's move onward. And there was one other captivating moment that happened at the Bananas game, which actually I didn't find out what the gravity of that was until this morning. While I was in the stands, now I had really good seats because you see where it says VIB back there? That means very important banana. That is a $125 meet and greet ticket. So actually, I got to walk on the infield before the game. Got to meet players. Got to meet a lot of people who I've been watching for the past few years on YouTube. Robert Anthony Cruz. I got to meet Dakota Stilts Albritton. The world's tallest pitcher. This stuff was awesome. Jesse Cole was not there. But late in the game, somebody came over and into the section and handed me a bag, a big giant bag of plush toys. And these plush toys were the Bananas mascot named Split. You can kind of, if you look back here, you'll see Split right there in a Chesapeake Bay Sox mug, coffee mug. So I had this big bag of plushes, and so I get up and I start tossing them to fans. I start tossing them several rows back. I'm just whack, whack. Throwing these things back to everybody. And I thought, okay, this is probably part of the Fans First experience that we don't see on the YouTube, but something that they do. But no, there's actually a very touching story behind this. There's this kid, a fan, who went to the game, and he was celebrating his birthday. So he had money, supposedly, quote, hundreds of dollars, and bought a ton of merch, bought a ton of these split plushies. And what he wanted to do was he wanted to give them out to the fans for free. So he got the Banana Ball staff involved. They've got the Nationals ushers and Nats Parks ushers and people like that involved, and they just started throwing these things out. And, they handed me a bag of them, and I just got up and just stood up and just started throwing these things. Little did I know at the time, because keep in mind, I was trying to stay focused on both the game and doing the plush throwing, that I didn't realize at that time that this was some kind of an organized effort. And second of all, I didn't realize that somebody from Fans First Entertainment was filming this whole thing. Anyway, fast forward to today. I find my face all over a Jesse Cole video, an official banana ball video, short video that Jesse Cole had released and told the story about what happened that last Friday. And I'm so, I was just at the right place at the right time. So yeah, I was really happy about that. All right. Okay, I know I'm boring everybody with sports discussion because you see the REC up there, and I'm kind of talking Bonnet off. I'm kind of talking Bonnet off right now, even though I'm not talking about anything political or anything serious. So, because guess what? You know, we all have real lives too. Okay, it's not just I just don't sit here and think, okay, radio coding, FCC coding, radio coding. I do have other things that I like to talk about. Actually, it's to the point of, and sports has always been a big thing for me. And it's not, not in the same way that most other sports fans are. I mean, yeah, if there's, do I have a favorite MLB team? Yes, the Los Angeles Dodgers. I lived in Southern California for decades, and to this day, even though I'm in Orioles and Nationals country right now, I still bleed Dodger blue. I still do. Do I follow the Dodgers religiously? No, I don't. I just simply don't have the time, and I don't have the time to watch games. And these days, it's so hard to watch games with all the different choices out there and all the different streaming services. And I mean, yeah, MLB TV is available. For a while I had a T-Mobile subscription a while back, I was getting MLB TV for free, so that was an added bonus. But even with that, I don't always have time to watch games as they happen. I like to watch the condensed games, so I will do that with MLB sometimes. I also do that with Major League Cricket. I am a fan of the Major League Cricket. I am not a fan of any specific team, although the Texas Super Kings and the San Francisco Unicorns are doing very good. I am very huge and religious for John Boy Media and the Warehouse Games, and especially the Ball and Play League that just happened. So there is that. I'm in the process right now because if you go to my personal blog, which used to be called Rants from Riverton, now it's Michi Bradley taking my bonnet off. A lot of the posts lately have been about sports, and back in the late 2000s, I used to do sports. I used to be on camera and did sports. I did Michi Chan's Real Derby. I did the Arizona Derby Report. I used to travel to games. I used to live announce Derby bouts. I was the mistress of ceremonies at a couple of these bouts. I was known for my red plaid skirt, similar to, kind of like something along the lines of what you see behind me. That's not the actual skirt that I wore. That one's way too small. But yeah, that just kind of, it's the symbolism there of my past. And, you can see other symbolisms of my past up there, too. You see Grassroots Radio Conference. You see J1. Right over here, you see my other half. My other half is in the picture now. Up here, you'll see old roller derby flyers. So, I mean, this is the stuff I used to be involved with. And we had a lot of fun. And, those were definitely some good times. So, I'm in the process right now of starting a new Substack, and it's going to be called Michi-chan Sports. And this goes back to my days at roller derby, when I had the role of Michi-chan. I was known as Michi-chan, and if you go to this YouTube channel and you look at the channel itself, for the 40th anniversary of REC, I did repost some of the old Michi-chan roller derby videos. and you'll see it. The Michi Real Derby, and there's another one out there called the Arizona Derby Report, which is actually what Michi Real Derby turned into. So yeah, for about over the span of 2007 to 2009, I was very involved in the Arizona women's flat track roller derby scene, which was still kind of in its in its adolescence at the time. It wasn't in its infancy anymore. It was kind of starting to get into its adolescence, and it was starting to grow. And of course, women's flat track roller derby has evolved quite a bit, rules and things like that. Now banked track started to get a little bit popular. One of the Arizona Derby leagues that was flat track went to bank track as the Arizona Derby Dames. I was just reading today about the Women's Flat Track Derby Association creating a new open system to allow for WIFTA teams to play traditionally non-WIFTA teams and stuff like that. There's some interesting activities going on, and they've got some very good policies at WIFTA regarding things, which I really can't. I don't want to get into with the bonnet on right now. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's talk about probably the reason why people would want to connect to this video, which they're not right now. So let's see what we've got here. So the question that has come up, we've received inquiries into the shop on this, is right now the House is considering H.R. 1. Now, H.R. 1, actually in the House version, was called the Big Beautiful Bill. That is that's not that is not the that when the Senate version came, they actually struck the name Big Beautiful Bill out. The Senate version, and it looks like they're voting on it right now. And right now, it's as of right now, this very moment. Let's see. This is on motion to concur in the Senate amendment on H.R. 1. Right now, there's one Republican who's voting no. 193 voting yes, still 26 to vote there. All Democrats so far have voted against H.R. 1. Now, what's in H.R. 1 that has to do with broadcasting and with the FCC? There's only one significant thing that's in there, and that is spectrum auctions. For a very long time now, for several years, since 2023, the FCC has not had the authority to conduct any spectrum auctions, whether it's for television, radio, broadband, any spectrum use. That needs an auction. They weren't able to do it because the auction authority expired, and there was a lot of issues at the time regarding they wanted to put the spectrum auctions into a defense bill, and there was some controversy about doing that. And of course, this is my automated call from the CVS drugstore telling me that I've got prescriptions waiting. Okay, fine. So where were we? So there was no spectrum auctions, and keep in mind that the desire to bring back spectrum auctions is a bipartisan matter. And this is something that both sides can agree on. When Rosenworcel was in charge, she was begging for the spectrum auctions to happen. Carr is also very much in support of spectrum auctions. And honestly, from an REC on perspective, if we're looking at the specific issue of the spectrum auctions are something that we need in this country in order to be able to compete with other nations. Right now, it's easier for companies to set up shop in other countries than it is in the United States right now, because one part because of the lack of spectrum auctions, the fact that the FCC's been stalemating on a ton of spectrum, and they haven't done anything with it. Now, of course, how does that affect radio? It does, because if the FCC can't auction off broadband spectrum, they also can't auction off radio spectrum. Now, to understand where we go with spectrum auctions, we have to understand we have to understand a couple things. First of all, to make it clear, non-commercial educational stations where if the during a filing window or whatever, if it's only involving non-commercial stations such as an LPFM windows that we had in 2023, the NCE that we had in 2021, those windows, as long as they are all dealing with non-commercial entities, there is no spectrum auction. There's a point system. In full service, we use a fair distribution process, and then if fair distribution can't find a winner, then we go to a point system. And that's the way it works in full power, where LPFM is just a point system. And but in the commercial world, we use auctions to settle mutually exclusive applications. Now, of course, there are concerns, especially if there's a commercial FM auction. Oh, it's going to kill all these LPFM stations. It's going to destroy LPFM. You hear this stuff all the time. And the problem is that a lot of folks don't understand the process that you got to go through to get an FM allotment, what goes in the auction. It's not like the NCE auction where there's just a date that opens up anything that can fit, bam, you can do that. And the full service commercial FM does not work that way. The way full service commercial FM works is that there's allotments for various communities. Each community, communities have different allotments. The allotment is the channel and the class of a station that would go there. Most of the allotments are currently being used. There are some vacant ones. You can find those in 73-202 of the rules. So what happens is that if somebody wants to start a radio station and they determine that because they're maybe out in the middle of nowhere, that there's actually an open channel between 92.1 and 107.9 that meets all of the 73-207 distance separation requirements, code channel, first, second, third, IF, everything to Mexico, Canada. What they have to do is, first of all, they have to tie it to a community, and the community needs to be a legitimate community. It just can't be a hole in the wall. And that's something, actually, since the 1990s, some of the first filings I ever made with the FCC in proceedings were filing objections to oppositions in allotment cases, because this was during a time when anybody could say, yeah, there's open space here for this community. We'll just say this community, and just say, hey, we want the allotment. The FCC didn't charge for it at the time. And the problem was that they were trying to put in allotments in ghost towns, in communities that don't exist, in community names that were eventually rolled up into larger communities, and there was really no association with the old community. We just did one just recently for the NCE window, in the last NCE window for a little area called Crystal, Nevada, which there's actually two Crystal Nevadas, both in southern Nevada. One is in Nye County, that's north of Pahrump, northwest of Las Vegas. And then the other Crystal was in Clark County, the same county that Las Vegas is in. And this was up on Interstate 15 between Las Vegas and St. George, Utah. The one that's in Clark County was the one that was being applied for. And it was the only thing that they thought was a community. And the problem was that you go back and you look and you see, okay, Crystal, Nevada did exist. Back in the 1940s, it was just a waypoint on the Union Pacific Railway. There was really never anybody. I mean, they said that the population of Crystal in 1940 was 10 people. You go to that location now, it's a truck stop. Nobody lives there. It's just a truck stop. There's solar farms all over the place, but nobody lives out there. And the community is not listed on the census. It's not recognized. So there's no, there's nothing in the census. So there's not much that they go by. There are rules about that. But the one key thing that the FCC looks for when choosing a community of license for both NCE and for full service is that it is a legitimate community and that it is listed on the census as at the minimum a census designated place, if not a city or a town, incorporated. But it doesn't have to be incorporated as long as it's listed as a census designated place. You could probably it'll probably go. So these are, this is what they look for. And that's one of the first filters, because Section 307 of the Communications Act states that that broadcast licenses have to be fairly distributed among the several states and communities. And they use the word communities in there. So this is how the FCC interprets 307 of the rules. In the non-com world, we use the filing windows, and pretty much anybody could, specify their filing, their community license, as long as it's a legit one. Now, LPFM doesn't have this because LPFM is secondary. 307 does not apply to LPFM. The second part is where it comes to commercial stations. Commercial, they use an allotment process. And so you find this community, you find that it's properly spaced. You don't actually choose a site. The location that you use for the allotment is actually a reference point. It's usually the same reference point for a community that the Census Bureau recognizes. You go to fccdata.org, pull up by city, you'll see those reference coordinates. We have them in there. So the way it works is that the proponent would file a construction permit, and they would file a petition for rulemaking. And in the construction permit, of course, they would use the reference coordinate as the facility, as the location. And in the petition for rulemaking, they have to say, hey, we are asking for this channel and this class to be allotted to this community as that community's first local transmission service. And then they have to give some information. This is an incorporated city. They have their own fire department. They have their own police department. They're in this county. And there's a lot of things that go into that. Now, if it involves a station that could probably put at least 50% of a city grade signal into an urbanized area, then there's higher qualifications that we have to go to, and we have to look at, is the community that's being considered, is it actually truly independent of that metro area, or is it part of that metro area? So those are the things that we have to look at. Now, so what will happen is that application and that will be filed. The FCC will issue a notice of proposed rulemaking, and that will open up a 30-day period for comments, a 15-day period for reply comments, where the FCC is saying, look, we're going to propose to allot, channel 232A to Podunk, okay? And, comments will be taken by this date and this date. One thing that has to be done in those proceedings is that whoever proposed it has to file comments in that proceeding and say that, hey, I'm still interested in this. They have to show continuing interest. However, what can also happen in that 30-day period is somebody could file a counterproposal. You know, they say 232A in podunk. Well, here, somebody could say, look, I'm counterproposing 232C3 in Farmville. Farmville has a bigger population than Podunk. So all of a sudden, now you have a counterproposal. Now, of course, the original proponent can object to that and all that stuff, but the FCC will then look and see. There's a criteria that they use. It's called the Tuck criteria to determine which of these will be a preferential arrangement of allotments. And then that's the one that they go with. And then, so what happens at that point is the FCC says, look, there's not going to be a filing window yet. It'll be done at a later time. Well, the filing window will happen during, when the auction is announced. The auction is technically a filing window for that allotment. Now, keep in mind another thing too. Another nice change that the FCC had done over the years is they imposed a filing fee, and the filing fee is somewhere in the. I can tell you here in just a moment here. Filing fee for an amendment to the table of allotments is $4,545. That's how much they would have to pay for that filing to get that allotment. So yeah. So the allotment. So what will happen is that during when the auction time comes up, first the FCC does what's called a short form process, where you file a short form with the FCC, and first of all, the FCC announces which of the allotments are going to be out there, which allotments are going to be up for auction, and right now, with the number of them that are vacant right now, we would have a pretty big auction with probably about 70, 80 possible vacant allotments. I haven't sat down and counted them all, but there's quite a few of them in there. Like I said, if you want to go to the rules, look at 73.202. They're all there. So what happens is that there is a short form process that you first file. If you want to play in the auction, anybody can play in the auction. They have to do is they have to file the short form, and with that they also pay a filing fee. With that, it's probably about $700 and something now. And on that short form, all they're doing is just filling out some administrative information, and they're also going to be specifying which of the allotments they want to bid on. They can select that they're going to possibly bid on all of them, but they could also say, yeah, I only want to bid on this, and this one. And so when the auction comes, the auction will be restricted for each of those allotments to those who timely filed their short forms. And the thing is even if somebody files a short form, if they don't include a city, they won't be able to bid on it. If somebody files a short form for Farmville and for Podunk, and now, if they want to, they won't be able to bid on the allotment that's in Hooterville. They won't be able to do it. It won't work. So that's kind of the way it is. Now, also too, the original proponent can also file. They file the short form too, and they can participate in it. Now, keep in mind that other than new entrant bidding credits and things that would be available to everybody who are new entrants, the person who proposed the original allotment does not get any priority in any way. They will bid just like everybody else does. Now, let's say, now the other thing too is that a short form can be filed as a non-commercial entity. And that short form would be, could be, non-commercial. And in that case, there's no filing fee because the Communications Act prohibits filing fees and regulatory fees on non-commercial entities. And if they are the only one that files a short form for that specific allotment, they'll get it. So there is kind of a backdoor way of getting a station during the allotment, but it is a huge gamble because there are some folks out there that will just file a short form and just do it across the board. So, I mean, it's you can always put your name in and just hope for the luck of the draw. No guarantee that, that'll be in that situation. Now, if it's a situation where there's a commercial and a non-commercial that file short forms for the same allotment, as long as there's a commercial one present, all the non-commercial ones are wiped out. Now, one strategy that a lot of non-commercial broadcasters do, the ones with resources, is they will file and they will participate in the window as a commercial applicant. There's nothing stopping them from doing that. And it is totally a legal thing to do. So that means that you would pay the short form fee, because basically what you're doing is you're proposing a commercial station. And then you play in the auction. If you win the auction, then of course you have to pay the auction proceeds. You have to pay whatever the price comes out to. But then once you get the construction permit and then eventually the license, you can always turn around and change that to a non-commercial educational, which means that you won't have to pay the annual regulatory fees for that full power station. There are no regulatory fees in full service non-commercial, whether it's in the reserve band or whether it's in the regular commercial band. As long as you are a nonprofit, you don't pay regulatory fees. This includes this includes stations that are operated by bona fide nonprofit companies that are actually running commercial stations. Believe it or not, but they don't pay regulatory fees. They'll pay filing fees, but they won't pay regulatory fees. The laws are different between the two. So they will pay one, but not for the other. So anyway, that's kind of at the point of where we've got for that. Now, translators are a little different. Translator, you still have, what you do is you file in the window. You would file an application in the window. You would also file another form that includes the information necessary for the auction. So you file in that window, and it's a lot easier to file in this case as non-commercial, just because the chances of mutual exclusivity are far reduced. And so these applications all get filed, and then if there is mutual exclusivity, there's a lot more technical flexibility than there is with the allotments and the full service to move things around. This is what happened in 2003 with the Great Translator Invasion, Auction 83, where Radio System Industries and Edgewater Broadcasting filed 14,000 applications. A lot of those were granted because they made technical changes and were able to break off the mutual exclusivity. As long as they can do that, as long as they're able to find somewhere to go, then they're fine. They can get it, even as a non-commercial. And that's how a lot of these 2003 translators were handed out. However, if it involves commercial applicants, and there is a mutual exclusivity that just cannot be overcome, then we go to the issue of if it can't be overcome, then we go to the issue of auctions, and then auctions will settle the mutual exclusivity. Now, keep in mind that in that past in 2003, we had the last big window, the Great Translator Invasion. That resulted in about 15,000 applications. There were quite a few applications that were filed in that window. Now, between then, after that, eventually the FCC saw that there was some there was some monkey business going on, so they kind of put a stop on the grants of these translator construction permits. Then they went to this policy that we're only going to grant 10 for each entity. Obviously targeting what's now called KLUB, what used to be EMF, targeting Radio Assist and Edgewater Broadcasting, Clark Parish up in Twin Falls, Idaho. And then that, of course, created a bunch of hubbub. Obviously EMF was complaining. Everybody was saying, no, this is not fair. It's arbitrary and capricious and all that good old Administrative Procedure Act talk. But what it eventually wound up is, it was the issue regarding what happened in the 2003 window was actually a part of what became the Local Community Radio Act of 2010. People think that the LCRA is only about LPFM. It is about LPFM, but it was also about translators. And it was about the fact that there were so many applications filed for translators in 2003 that there wasn't going to be much room left for LPFMs. So the law that was passed in 2010, and this was something, because keep in mind that back in the mid-2000s, I was sounding the alarm. Prometheus was sounding the alarm on this issue. I was tracking this information. I was participating in other proceedings and talking about what happened in Auction 83, even to the point of where I had this website up back then called the Traffic Report, where we were monitoring the activities of Radio Assist Ministries, Edgewater Broadcasting, and what they were doing was that they were assigning their construction permits to other entities, and they were selling them for like 5,000, 10,000, a couple thousand here or there. And the thing is that they never had to pay to get those construction permits from the FCC. They were basically taking something free from the government and then selling it and making the profit. And and we pointed that out because when the transactions started to get into the multiple millions, we were screaming about that. And so eventually, Section 5 of the Local Community Radio Act states that LPFMs and translators will be distributed based on community need. And this is where we saw a bunch of stuff happen in 2012 with what was called the Fourth Report and Order and the Fifth Report and Orders that had to do, it was mainly the Fifth Report and Order, I believe, that had to do with translators. And it set up these channel floors, it set up this function, this thing where some areas are spectrum available, some areas are spectrum limited. If you are going in, if a translator was proposed in a spectrum limited area, you have to show how it doesn't preclude LPFM opportunities. And of course that opened up, that policy put into play, then that opened up and that kept openings available for new LPFM stations that filed in the second generation LPFM filing window in 2013. And there was, well over 3,000 plus LPFM applications that were filed in that window. But anyway, after that, and this actually happened after several years after the LPFM filing window, there were still the mutually exclusive applications from the 2003 window that were still sitting out there as late as around 2015, 2016 or so. And the FCC eventually got down to doing an auction on the ones that still remained. And there were very few. And in that auction, the FCC did not even make $1 million in that auction. The final number, I believe, was somewhere in the middle six figures. It was a mess, because the reason is because all these other translators eventually found their way to somewhere. And then, of course, came AM revitalization, where a lot of those 2003 translators were able now to be moved up to 250 miles. And then, of course, then the FCC came back and said, okay, anybody who didn't take advantage of that first bite of the apple, if you're an AM station, you want a translator, this is the time to apply for one. And then we had that closed restricted windows, those two restricted filing windows for new FM translators. So spectrum auctions do help in those cases. Now, on the interference issues, in the case of full power, LPFM stations already have to provide full protection to the allotment. So if there is a vacant Class A allotment, the LPFM station has to stay at least 67 kilometers away on code channel, because that is the 73807 minimum distance requirement. And, but of course the problem, of course, comes in, and we've seen this recently. There was a couple high-profile cases a while back of new allotments coming in areas that are obviously close to LPFM stations. Because remember, when you do an allotment, the FCC doesn't care about, they don't have, they're not supposed to care about the status of the LPFMs. If anything, the Local Community Radio Act specifically prohibits them from giving an LPFM station priority over a primary station. And that was based on an old rule, an old policy that was put in place back in the late 2000s, where if a full-service station wanted to move, if it displaced an LPFM, then they need to help the LPFM find a different channel to go to that meets those requirements. And also, too, second adjacent was available at that time. There's actually a very interesting, different form of second adjacent waiver that we had back before the formal process came in with the Local Community Radio Act. But in that case, they allowed overlap between the interference zone and population. The idea was that they needed to find a place for the LPFM station to go, so that way the full power station could do their move. If there was nothing that could be found, and everybody's putting their hands up saying there's nothing we can do, then guess what? The modification for the commercial station, the primary commercial station, was denied, and the LPFM took precedence. The LCRA stopped that. So there's that. So right now, there's gonna be, if a station does win in the auction, if somebody wins in the auction, they put up a station. There is a possibility that's going to interfere with an LPFM, especially if the allotment was added after the LPFM station came in. Because if the LPFM station was to come in later, they wouldn't be able to go that far because of the allotment. All right, we have, it's lowercase, so it's WTUC 98.5. Okay, cool. Welcome aboard. Jackson from WTUC 98.5. Let's see. Let's have a look. WTUC. Like I said, this is Derail Michi. This is also a good time to ask any questions. I mean, if you don't want me to talk about spectrum auctions, or if you want to have a question about anything, the advice is always free. Of course, we welcome donations. I'm actually kind of at a point of where I'm starting to beg for them now, because things have been so slow over here. We definitely do need financial assistance over here at REC, and over here, for the efforts that we're doing right now, because right now, the professional side of the house has been beyond slow. So, of course, anytime that anybody wants to drop anything, go to the website, recnet.com, fccdata.org, and you'll see at the bottom left-hand corner, there's a little coffee cup that says donate. Drop a little, drop a lot. Whatever you do, we love you a lot. Okay, so there's that. Okay, Toccoa, Georgia. Perfect. All right, welcome on board. Welcome on board there, and we're glad to have you on board there. Okay, where is Toccoa? Isn't that like northeast of Atlanta? Yeah, I was right, northeast of Atlanta. One of these days, I'm going to get to Savannah, Georgia. Um, I want to go see a Bananas game at historic Grayson Stadium. But yeah, there I go again. I'm going off on the sports thing. But anyway, I just wanted to get in the fact that the HR1 bill, which is being looked at right now, and right now, as from what I can see here, what do you mean this live stream recording is not available? What? Eek. Okay, what did this thing pass or? Yeah, it did. Okay, okay. I was looking at old information, I guess. Okay. Okay, yeah. So yeah, breaking news, the HR1, the quote big beautiful bill did pass. Um and let's see here. Looking at CNN right now. And trying to see here, voted Thursday morning to approve the domestic policy bill, sending to his desk for a signature. Package passed by the Senate in a marathon session earlier this week included tax cuts and funding boosts for the Pentagon and border security. And includes more contentious spending cuts to pay for the rest of the bill. I'm just reading CNN. I am trying to see what I'm not even saying. Yeah, they're not. I was trying to see what the vote was. I don't see that anywhere in the CNN flash article, but we'll get to that another time. We'll look at that another time. So REC position on HR1 big beautiful bill. We took no position, nor would it have been appropriate for REC to take a position on this legislation, because if this legislation would have been mainly about the spectrum auctions and nothing else, or the spectrum auctions and other, compatible communications related issues that we would otherwise take a, that we would otherwise take a positive position on, yeah, then we would have supported that kind of a standalone legislation that involves spectrum auctions, because we do support the return of spectrum auctions. That's the only way to keep things moving. Overall, not just in broadcasting, but as a community, because there are rural quality of life issues that are related. There are access to spectrum issues, and these are all part of REC's objectives. We're not just community radio. We're not just LPFM. We're about free speech, but we're also about especially improving the rural quality of life, and that's a part of our objective. You go to recnet.com/objectives. So because the spectrum auction is only one little microscopic part of HR1, we took no position, and we're not going to. We didn't. Now, bonnet off, I had opinions. Bonnet on, like I said, we have no position on HR1, and we are not going to, we're not going to congratulate or be very upset at its passing, on the record and with the bonnet on. Okay, like I said, the REC logo's up, so the bonnet is on, and that's all I'm going to say about it. The reason why I say bonnet on, the reason why I use bonnets, a lot of people say hats. I'm wearing my REC hat. I'm wearing my HOA hat. I'm wearing my my president of the company, my CEO hat. No, I do bonnets instead of hats. 2 reasons. Number 1, Bonnets are cuter. I like cute clothes. Second, a bonnet is different than most hats. With most hats, you still have a very well field of view. Where with many bonnets, they are designed in a way where the sides come down because, it's protecting you from the sun. So the sides will come down. And what that means is when I'm looking at things through the bonnet, I see what's directly in front of me. I see directly what's in front of me and what's kind of left into the right of center. But what I don't see is the extreme views, from both the extreme left and the extreme right. So when I'm looking at legislation, when I'm looking at rulemaking, when I work with stations, I look at what's inside the bonnet, what I can see through the bonnet. I don't get influenced in my decisions on what airs on Fox News or what's aired on Midas Touch, depending on which side you want to look at. I work with everybody from, as I always say, I work with everybody from socialists to malicious, including people that don't agree with my medical conditions and don't agree with the way I'm doing my life. Because you know what they all have? They all have free speech, and that's the important part. Everybody having a fair chance to get their message out. And, if one side says, oh, the other side is, has too many stations. Well, guess what? They filed more applications. No wonder. So there we go. Let's talk about, radio DNS. Thanks. I needed to get off that topic, so I'm glad you brought me off that topic and back into reality. Does radio DNS only work with IceCast and not Shoutcast? No, it should work with Shoutcast. You just have to put the correct streaming URL in there, because it's still an MP3. If you're running MP3 through Shoutcast, Shoutcast doesn't matter. It's just whatever URL that you put in there. So if you've got the Shoutcast on a mount point, you're going to want to make sure that the mount point is part of the URL. It's the same URL that you would use, like, for example, it's the direct URL to listen to the stream. It's not necessarily the URL to get like a screen that shows that has the player window and has the little thing in there. It's the actual stream itself. It's like if you had a copy of Winamp. I'm dating myself here with Winamp, but if you have a copy of Winamp and you go in and you can dial in the stream directly by opening the stream, and you put that URL in there and it goes right to there. It doesn't take you to a page first. So you have to get that information directly from your streaming provider, or if you're running your own server, you'll need to check the documentation for Shoutcast to determine what your streaming URL is. And again, that includes the mount points. That includes the port number and the mount points. So those are the things that's right. No, so I'm running ACC. Okay, I think are you trying to say that you are running ACC because it's required by iHeart? Okay. Yeah, you can do that now. I believe we have it. I believe we have a setting in, and I assume you're trying to set this up through my LPFM or something, through the my LPFM interface. But we do have, I believe we have a setting in there where you can set up, like, for example, a 48K AAC stream, as the thing. Yeah, you should. Yeah, okay. So yeah, you should be able to set. I believe you should be able to set that up in my. I assume you're using my LPFM. I assume that you're trying to use the my LPFM. to do this. Fortunately, you're talking to my LPFM. So let's see if we can get you in there. Oh yeah, look at you there. There we go. Let's go. I'm actually in your my LPFM account right now as we speak. And I see, yeah, okay, I see you're setting it up here. Yeah, so there is an option there there is an option in there to take it to AAC, and then your stream bit rate 48, and then you got to put in your stream URL, and your streaming provider would be able to provide that for you, and then you can go ahead and put that in there. You can build that up. Okay, looks like you've already built up your links, and you still got to upload your logos. Remember, we need 5 logos: 32 by 32, 112 by 32, 128 by 128, 320 by 240, 600 by 600. You've got to use something like Photoshop or what's the name of that? Open source alternative? Was it? I think it's called GIMP or something like that. I think it is for to do that. But yeah, you gotta and we strictly enforce the we strictly enforce that because Radio DNS also strictly enforces that. So yeah. All right. So yeah, I appreciate you setting up in my LPFM. We need more stations doing that. MyLPFM.com. It's a station portal for let me see, can I do this? Can I frickin' do this? Let's see if it'll let me do this. All right, we're going to test something out. Okay, I didn't realize I took my audio away too. Okay, okay, all right. Actually, let's do this. Hang on. I'm going to be silent here for about a minute or two. Okay, I should be back now. You should be hearing me. And let's see if we can get to. All right, let's see. Okay, that's not what we want. We want to kill this. Let's see. Just do that. Poof. Gone. All right, we need to add a window capture for Chrome. Let's see if this works. Of course it's not working. Of course it's not working. When has anything to Michi ever worked? Okay, let's try something different here. Window capture. We're going to create a new one. Ah, there we go. All right, let's see if this works. Poof. Oh, there we go. I see Google Chrome. And of course, my screen's a weird size, so we're gonna pop it over there. Okay, there we go. Now, if you're lucky to be in Riverton and you're lucky to be here, we have a few additional things that we can do that y'all can't do on the outside. And one of them is the ability to be able to get into. I have when I go to different to the different REC sites, I have more buttons than the rest of you guys have. So you'll see that I've got this nice little button there called REC override login. So I can type in your call sign WTUC, and see I don't need to know your password. I just hit the override button. Bam, I'm in. Okay, so there we are. We are in your my LPFM. Now I'm not gonna. There's really not much personal information here, but I do want to show off my LPFM. This is a good opportunity to do so. but we have a page with the station information, census report, information on applications filed, the PACE criteria. Since you're a new station, you wouldn't be qualified for PACE. It takes you like 4 years to get that. So there's that tool. We have you can do a check to see if there's if you want to move. We can check for that. Same location channel changes. It's checking right now. Oh, look at that! You got potential channels available. They all require second adjacent waivers, but there are potential channels you can move to in case something was to happen. Height above average terrain check. You're currently showing 29 meters above, and so you're 100 watts. You use that if you're more than 30 meters and you're less than 100 watts. Now it checks to see. The encroachment encroachment report is next. This is going to tell you whether what the other stations look like from a contour perspective. So right now, you'd be receiving interference from WSB in Atlanta, according to this, because you're inside the contour. So at the contour, they're coming at 48.7 dB. You're at actually you're interfering. You're 43.5 interfering contours reaching there. So, I mean, there's some data. Okay, yeah. So WSB actually places a 47.5 dB signal at your location. Now, keep in mind that anything less than a 54, is when you start, getting degraded stuff. So a 47.5, while still, actually that's a 47.5 interfering contour. I mean, so code channel is normally 40. If it was in the Northeast, it was a Class B. Class B, that'd be 34 dB would be the standard interfering contour. So you are definitely inside the interfering contour of WSB. So we are predicting potential incoming interference from WSB. Your first adjacent channel looks great. Second adjacent, you got a second adjacent short space. So I'm assuming you got a waiver. With that, you got an 80.2 dB. Coming in on that second adjacent, so that would have been a fairly easy waiver to get during the process. So yeah, so that's that. We have a translator interference section where if a translator was to apply for a modification, you can go to this tool, and it would allow you to see if that translator. If you'd be able to use that translator as part of a interference report to try to prevent that translator from doing what they want to do. Because, basically bottom line is whoever's first. When it's between LPFM and translators, it's whoever's first gets it. So there is that. We have the LPFM move map, which basically shows where you can move the station without, and still stay within there. Now we have a nice little option here for the EAS and weather. You could set up your if there was any alerts in the system, we'd be seeing them there. We have a test history. Now there's also a couple options that are available for our paid clients, where if you have you could set up our system so you can put on your website page. You put an embedded JavaScript on there. And what it will do is it will allow you to, it's kind of like a little widget that will show if there's emergency alerts in your area. So you can put that up on your station's website and see that. You can maintain your listings here. There's a place to upload your logo. And we talked about the radio DNS. And the last one has to do with any account activity with REC as far as professional services and stuff. I'm not going to show that for privacy reasons, but yeah, that is my LPFM. Thanks for letting me be able to thanks for coming on board, so that way I had a good station. So yeah, because I've not had a chance to really demonstrate my LPFM to anybody. And so that was a very good opportunity, and I do appreciate you letting me be able to partake in that. Let's see here. I'm gonna try to find my chat here. Yep. Okay. You started your LPFM when you're 18 years old. Cool. Well, you got to start sometime. All right. So right now I'm going for about almost 90 minutes. Got 4 people watching right now. So I think what we'll do is we'll cut this. I'm going to give a 2-minute warning. If anybody has any questions, wants to jump in, say hi, just wants to check in, any comments, questions on Spectrum auctions or anything, again, I got to, and right now the bonnet is on. The bonnet is on right now. If, this is, if the bonnet was off, we would see this up on the screen, and that basically says, "Hey, I'm freely speaking. I'm not representing REC." Just remember, this channel, this YouTube channel, is not an REC channel. It is a Michi Bradley channel. Now, I obviously present a lot of REC produced content that is produced with the bonnet on. But that does not stop me from using this channel for other reasons. Some might say, well, why don't you split off the two? And maybe we'll do that in the future. But right now, this channel is a mix of bonnet on, bonnet off. We have that right now with Substack. We have recnet.substack.com for bonnet on. We have Michi Bradley sub.substack.com for bonnet off. And then we now have Michi-chan Sports at .substack.com, which is starting up. And that will also be considered bonnet off because there's really no communications industry things that we would be talking about on there. We'd just be talking about, Jack and Zoe from We Got Ice. We talk about Ball and Play League. I'm in the process right now of building up data for Ball and Play League from the last season. They just had Ball and Play 3. Great season. We Got Ice made it to the finals and they got beaten. But in the warehouse games, I am a big fan of We Got Ice, and I'm a big fan of Team Baggage, and of course Team Baggage is the underdog because that's Jimmy O'Brien and Jake Storiale, who are the founders of the founders of John Boy Media, and they kind of don't have the same focus that the other teams do have, and if you ever get a chance to, if you don't know what the hell I'm talking about, Google the warehouse games. The warehouse games. They play in this used to be a carpet warehouse in Jersey City, New Jersey. And they set up their own games. They have their own ground rules, their own little features and things like that. It's like, it's like backyard. It's like when if you grew up as a boy, playing backyard sports but making your own rules, or like the old days of stickball. If the ball hits the garbage can, it's a home run, or something like that. That's kind of the way about that. Excellent. Okay. And the bonnet is off now, by the way, because I've got the signal up there. The bonnet is off signal. And Patrick Gloves, hello. Banana Ball. Oh, now you're talking my stuff. Yeah, you see all this stuff? Yeah, because I have been writing a lot about Banana Ball. I had a beautiful. I I know for William, if you're still on here, I know this is probably going to be repeating some of the stuff I talked about early on. But sure, what the heck, why not? We've already gone an hour and a half, so probably probably a lot of what I said back then is already forgotten. But I went to Banana Ball last Friday at Nationals Park. Went to go see the Savannah Bananas take on the Firefighters. Bananas won, of course. Now, unlike the Harlem Globetrotters, people say, "Oh, Banana Ball is nothing but Harlem Globetrotters." It's not. Yes, they dance. Yes, they do trick plays. But no, the outcomes are not staged. They are real outcomes. Because, in the first half of the season, before they launched, before they debuted the Firefighters and the Texas Tailgaters this year, all the games were Bananas and Party Animals. And actually, during those games, the Party Animals had a better record than the Bananas. The Party Animals are a totally different team. They're actually a better team athletically in some ways. Let's see. And so you're going to a game. Are you going to Fenway? Is that? Are you going to the Bananas Firefighters? I think it's at Fenway this weekend, Boston. I've been seeing a lot of posts in K Club about that. Maybe I've got to start doing a weekly Bananas stream. I think that'd be a cool idea. I miss doing sports. I really do. Back in my days of Michi-chan and Michi-chan Roller Sports Productions, I do after I went to Bananas this last weekend, I went to Chesapeake Bay Sox last week. My first sports outings in decades. It just brought back so much to me. It brought back so much of my childhood and so much of my growing up. And what I was doing at the game, at the Bananas game, goes back to my days when I used to actually with the full blessing of the Derby leagues, as I was getting involved in the game on the sidelines, and just being a character. I was a character. I was Michi-chan. I wore these red plaid schoolgirl skirts and stuff like that. It was fun, But I also did journalism, and I actually did in front of camera journalism back in those days. I looked totally different than I do today, but I did do that, and we had a lot of fun. But if you are going to Banana Ball this weekend, you're going to have a ton of fun. And and I'll tell you right now, expect the unexpected. That happened to me. I'll tell you. I'll tell you. When I went to the game, I was, I bought the VIB experience, and that's, you pay $125 instead of like $45. But the nice part about it is that you're able, first of all, to enter in through this special gate that only VIBs and members of what's called the K Club, which is their fan club, can get into. There's special areas set aside for VIB members. And the VIB members have access to an early meet and greet that's exclusive for the VIBs. And what they do is they set up tables on the infield. And they actually bring the VIB fans onto the infield, onto the dirt, to, meet the players. And so, I met Robert Anthony Cruz. I met Stilts. I met a lot of the players from both teams. It was the Bananas and the Firefighters that were playing. I met Princess Potassia. During the meet and greet, I did get a picture with. I did try to get a selfie with Princess Potassia, and and for some reason the selfie failed. And this is the interesting part was I went on my Facebook Messenger and just innocently said the selfie we took failed. And she's like, "Oh no." She got back to me. Actually, I got a Facebook message back from Princess Potassia, the actress who plays Princess Potassia. And so after the game, they did the party plaza after the post game party in the party plaza, and Potassia actually, I mean, it was crowded. I mean, we're talking, the Who, the Who concert's nothing compared to this. This was really crowded, but I eventually found my way over to Potassia. And she saw me, she waved, she's like, "Oh my God, it's you!" Yeah. And we walked over to a special section, and I got a really nice selfie with her. And like I said on my personal Facebook page at the end of that, and just like any good story, the Michi gets the princess in the end, and that's how that all worked out. It worked out very well. But there was something that did happen at the game, and this was a complete surprise to me because I didn't know about this until this morning. I was sitting in the VIB section, and where I was behind the first base dugout, 5 rows back, aisle seat, beautiful, beautiful seating. They treat their VIBs very well when it comes to the seat selection. So I had fantastic seats. Got a lot of good pictures too. Suddenly, late in the game, probably like about 7th, 8th inning or so, somebody comes down with a big plastic bag. This big bag was full of plushies. They were the Splits, the mascot, the one that you see back there inside the orange cup there. That's Split. A massive amount, a big giant garbage bag full of Splits. And they handed, I was kind of into it, and I volunteered to take the bag, and I just started throwing these plush toys along with a couple others to fans. And, I was putting a lot of smiles on a lot of people's faces. Kind of reminds me of my old Michi-chan days. And, just putting smiles on people's faces, making people happy, because that's what I like to do. I like to make people happy. And, okay, I didn't really think anything of it. I thought, okay, I thought maybe this was something fans first wanted to experiment. I thought this was a Jesse Cole experiment, is what I thought it was originally. Well, this morning I was greeted by a Jesse Cole video. And in this video, apparently there's a whole backstory behind what I was doing that Friday night at Nats Park. Apparently, a young kid was having a birthday that day. So he bought, and I'm assuming his family bought a ton of these bags of these Splits plushies. They said, "Look, I'm going to pay you $1,800, whatever. I want them all because we want to give them to the fans." So what they did was they worked through Fans First. They worked through the Banana Ball staff, who then worked through the Nats Park staff, and they made arrangements to get these bags out to the stands and into the fans. And I ended up being one of the people that got to throw these plush dolls. Here, this is it right here. This is it. This is Split. Okay, this is my Split plushie. Okay, so I got to be able to throw those, and I got to keep one for myself. But I did not realize that some kid paid for all these and set it up so people would toss them out to fans. I did not know that backstory. And I also did not realize that Fans First Entertainment was recording it in our section. So today there was a Jesse Cole video. I think it was actually released last night, but there was a Jesse Cole video that came out as one of his shorts on his Facebook and his LinkedIn. I actually discovered it on his LinkedIn because I always look at LinkedIn. And lo and behold, I'm watching this video, and lo and behold, I see me. I see the Michi. Oh my God. That was just totally unexpected. Let me see here. I don't know if I can. Oh yeah, maybe I can here. Hang on. I don't know if the audio's not going to come over. Oh, maybe it can. Hang on. Hang on here. We're going to play with this. Okay, here we go. All right, switching over. Okay. All right, there we go. We've got ourselves a screen. Desktop audio? Is this it? Okay, I'm assuming that's it. All right. Okay, yeah. Yeah, here's the video, and I'm going to make an attempt to play it. This may or may not work.
The most fans first thing
Okay, it's working just for me because the mute button is on. Let's go back and let's try this again.
The most fans first thing I've ever seen at a Savannah Bananas game was done by a fan. Meet Scott. This past weekend, he went to a sold-out Savannah Bananas game at Nationals Park in D.C. It was his birthday, and to celebrate, he bought boxes of these split plush toys. He spent hundreds of dollars on hundreds of little splits, which is crazy enough, but what he did next was wild. He gave them
there's the Michi!
all away.
There's the Michi!
He started passing them out to kids all around the stadium. He even worked with the national staff and ushers to make sure as many kids as possible could get one. Most people think about what they will get on their birthdays, but Scott was excited to give to others. Fans started calling him Banana Claus, and it's well-deserved. It was the most fans first thing I've ever seen done at a game. Our goal every night in Banana Land is to bring people together and spread joy. And Scott, may that happen better than we could ever imagine. The most fans first thing I've ever.
Imagine the look on my face when I first saw that video this morning on LinkedIn. Totally unexpected. You know, I've never had a really good surprise like that in my life like that. I had no way of knowing that my little split tossing was actually going to make it into the promotional video for Jesse Cole. So yeah, I am kind of a little starstruck and surprised. Now keep in mind that nobody asked me if I was going to do this. I didn't get approached. Sometimes what they'll do is, somebody from Banana Ball will say, look, we're going to do something in the show. Would you like to be a part of it? That happened earlier in the night. They had, 2 rows up from us, they had a little 5-year-old girl, and they wanted her to do, I think they wanted her to do the banana eating thing, where they eat where the little girl eats the banana to determine whether it's going to be a good game or a bad game. And as soon as the person from Fans First came over, from Banana Ball came over and asked the mom, do you think she'd be interested in doing that? The little girl's like, she just went to the complete shy mode. It's just so cute. And of course, I'm down here in the next row. I'm like, you can do it. And his parents were trying to talk her into it, and she's like, no, okay. And then I said, look, I'm backing out. Let the parents be the parents. But, I could be the encouraging Aunt Michi. But that, so yeah, they do have a lot of fun. And, expect that, expect things to happen. Expect very interesting things to happen. at the game. Surprises, especially Boston. Because if you know the Jesse Cole story, and I know we have gone completely from a radio blog into a sports blog. Like I said, the bonnet's off, so we're not talking REC shit anymore. This is a Michi blog. This is a Michi channel. Okay, we're talking Michi now. Read up, if you don't know the history of Jesse Cole, read up on that, because I think he was originally, a long time ago, he was a bat boy at Fenway for the Sox. So yeah, he has an emotional tie to that area. He is from Massachusetts. He is a Massachusetts native. That's something to definitely look into. To remember that there will be a connection. So this means that, you may see some very interesting people come up to the plate for the Bananas. And if you can ever in the future get to one of the other headliner shows, especially a Party Animals headliner at a minor league park, do it. The Party Animals experience, it's a completely different experience. The other day in an interview for The Athletic, Jesse Cole made an interesting comparison. He kind of said, it's kind of like Cirque du Soleil, where you have the one show. I think they've got a show called O, and then they got another one called Ka, and they were like two totally different shows, but they're all under the same banner, and they all do some of the same stuff. And that's kind of the way it is. That's kind of the way it works with the minor league, with the headliner shows that go to the minor league parks. Party Animals. Party Animals is more of a party environment, not as much of a kids environment. I mean, it is kind of a kids interested environment, but where the Bananas are more about role models and princesses and stuff like that. Party Animals for the kids is more like farts and toilet jokes. Okay, I mean it's kind of along that line. The Party Animals are just that. It's a party, and they do have the party atmosphere. It is a totally, from what I've seen, I have not been to a Party Animals headliner yet. Maybe one of these years. I was only able to get to Nats Park this year. I would love to see the Party Animals or the Firefighters or the Tailgaters or one of the two new teams that won't be announced till later this year come to Purdue Stadium here in Salisbury, Maryland. And like I told Eva, I said, look, if Banana Ball comes here, I'm buying tickets for every game. If you're in K Club, you do have that ability to do that. And also too, if you are serious about seeing Banana Ball games and not wanting to pay ticket scalper prices, which I would not trust I would not trust buying tickets through a scalper, because a lot of those are fraudulent. You buy it directly through Fans First Entertainment, Fans First Tickets. There's a lottery, a waiting list. There's over 2.5 million people nationwide on that waiting list right now. But if you join K Club, you pay, I think, like $59 or $69 for the year. But when your time comes up, you get first dibs before they go to the lotteries. And the lotteries get everything that's left. So I was able, and even in K Club, it's done by seniority. So those who joined K Club in previous seasons got first dibs before me. Fortunately, I was able to land VIB on Friday. I don't think there was VIB available on Saturday. I only wanted to go to one game. That's all I could afford to go to, because for me it's hotel rooms. So I didn't want to, and I ended up paying an extra night for the hotel room because I decided to come in a day early because of the scheduling. Keep in mind, they say it's going to be a 6:30 or 6 o'clock, 6:30, 7 o'clock game. Be there early. You're going to be there about 2 or 3 o'clock because the Party Plaza opens up. There's a lot of pregame activities that take place. You should get an email for a know before you go. Okay, let's see. Firefighters at Fenway? Not sure. I think Engine 37 and Ladder 26 are first due at Fenway. Though they probably won't use any on-duty firefighters. Oh, yeah. I mean, well, they do have, obviously the firefighters theme is definitely a first responders theme, and that's what I'm suggesting. I've already sent something to Jesse saying, if you do Delmarva, do a firefighters headliner out here. I think a firefighters headliner series, maybe 3 games, 3 games with either the party animals or three games with one of the 2 new teams would probably go over very well here, because we do have a very close-knit first responder community out here. About 3 or 4 years ago, a few years ago, an officer, Corporal Hecook, out of the Delmar Police Department. Delmar is an unusual place because it's a city that spans between both Delmar and Maryland. And it's technically one city. They administrate it as 2 different cities because of the state lines, but they use the same police department. So there's the Delmar Police Department. He was shot and killed. And it was a stupid killing. It was not, I mean, anytime somebody shoots a cop, it's stupid. And I have respect for good cops. Again, bonnet's off, so I'm speaking freely. So I do have respect for good cops. And every year since, they held a they held a memorial, and then now what they're doing is every year since then, they've been holding what's called the Hecook Fest, which is just a day of good old boys getting together and gathering and cooking hot dogs and doing whatever. But it just goes to show how much this community is connected to our law enforcement, our firefighters, our EMS, our dispatchers. Keep in mind, I have very, very, very high respect for emergency, what do they call them? Emergency communications technicians, ECTs. Some agencies call them, but the people who answer the phone at 911, the people who get on the radio and talk to the officers. I have a massive amount of respect for those people because, as someone who spent a good chunk of my life on the other side of a phone, I could only imagine the kinds of calls that they've got to deal with. And to me, I would not be able to last there for more than 2 days. It takes a steel stomach and a steel heart to handle those kinds of calls. And, I have a very high respect for our dispatchers and our 911 call-taking type people, the emergency communications technicians and such. I have a very high. So I really think that a public safety focused headliner tour for the Savannah Banana Ball would work out really good here. Firefighters as the headliner team. Now, you should expect a fire truck to appear during the player intros. What they normally do is they open up. At least what they did at Nats Park was they opened up the outfield wall gates at left field, and they brought the fire engine. They basically nudged a fire engine. They didn't take the tires over the warning track. They didn't want to put the truck on the grass for obvious reasons. But there was a truck there doing in all of its code 3 glory. It was there. So so you definitely are going to have a good experience both with the bananas and with the firefighters. So I am definitely I'll be watching those games this weekend. I think one of them is a day game even. So, even more the better. So I hope you have fun. I really do. And I hope you get on Facebook and you tell me about it and stuff. I would love to know about how it all went. Or maybe the next time I do a live stream, we could talk about it. We got good stuff. Anyway, people are dropping off. I am getting really hot. It's turning into 2 hours now. I've gone for too long. I'm wondering if we'll ever going to see the FCC legalize domestic shortwave broadcasting. I kind of brought that up in the delete proceeding. It's hard to say. It's hard to say what's going to happen. Oh, by the way, Patrick, do you know where you are you getting regular seats or VIB? And if so, where do you know where you're sitting yet? You probably know, at least for right now, what section you're in. You won't get I don't think you'll get your seat assignments for, well, you may have your seat assignments already. But they're usually pretty slow in getting those out to you. And, but anyway, on the domestic shortwave broadcasting, I would like to, I've had a mix. Okay, so you're gonna be a bleacher bum for this one. Cool. Okay, well, that's cool. Sometimes that's the best place to see the game. That's the best socials. That's a lot of this. Wrigley and and some of these older parks. That's the social spot. Is the bleacher bums. Yes. So yeah, definitely. I liked my seats up front. Actually, the day before on the Bay Sox game, because I knew that I was right across the street from the hotel. The hotel was right across the street. I actually did buy an advance ticket for the Bay Sox, and managed to get front row, dugout, aisle. So first row, first base, kind of around the same section I was at Banana Ball. $20 for the ticket. 20. Try getting a price like that at an MLB park for that kind of a ticket. Ain't happening. So I love these smaller minor league teams. They're awesome. We've got the Delmarva Shorebirds out here, and again, I hope one of these years we'll get Banana Ball out here on Delmarva for the first time. Back on the shortwave issue. This was an issue I think I brought up during delete. It is kind of a sticky wicket issue because of the fact that there are some there are some things about that. There are some international regulations, radio regulations that we do need to look at. There's ITU things about domestic broadcasting. There's in some parts of the world they have domestic broadcasting, but it's on the tropical bands. It's on the tropical shortwave bands. So that'd be like 75 and 90 meters, and those bands like down 3-5 megahertz. Down lower, 2 megahertz, 3 megahertz in that area where the tropical bands are for the areas between the two tropics. And they do, and that's where there's a lot of domestic broadcasting because medium wave doesn't work as great there as shortwave does. One of the other things that the ITU does endorse is the use of the 11-meter band. That's the 26 megahertz band for domestic shortwave broadcasting, and that's always been we've had a concept on the table. I've had the concept. We've had a concept for 26 megahertz domestic broadcasting for a long time. We have a section on the REC website called Alternate Spectrum, and actually we talk about the tropical bands. We talk about the 11-meter band for use in domestic shortwave. I honestly don't know if where we could go with domestic shortwave. Honestly, Several years ago, I was in Elkhart, Indiana, for the National Association of Shortwave Broadcasters. These were mainly all the Christian broadcasters that are on, that have domestic shortwave, that have U.S.-based stations. And somebody had come and gave me materials, because they were looking at doing a rule. I think they actually did file a petition for rulemaking. If we, with the bonnet on, I would say as long as we could see along the lines of that it's not stepping on the toes of anything in the RR in the internet in the ITU radio regulations regarding the domestic use of, say, like the 49 meter band or the 35 meter band, then perhaps we could look at a lower powered domestic shortwave service, maybe maybe 5,000 watt type stations and things like that. Something like that. But of course, the listeners. But this is this is what I saw with the 26 megahertz. And keep in mind, the reason why they've endorsed the ITUs endorsed that is because there were trials that did take place. There was trials that took place in Germany, and there were tests that took place in Mexico City, where they were testing out the what they were doing was they were doing DRM on fairly low powered like 1 kilowatt type facilities in the 11 meter band. So, but the nice thing about the 11 meter band is it's the 11 meter band. It's 98% of the time on that band you're not going to get propagation. You get propagation only, like, for example, if there's an opening on 10 meters or a skip on CV. And sometimes the maximum usable frequency goes up, into the 30s and such. And, but rest of the year, most of the time, outside of those sunspot cycles, that spectrum is a duck pond. And it's pretty much line of sight day or night, and that kind of a thing. It's not as you don't get a lot of skywave interference most of the year. I mean, most of the sunspot cycle, most every 12 years or so, in that spectrum, and that would be a great place for domestic broadcasting, especially DRM. But as far as the other bands go, it's hard to say what, I don't know how the NAB would accept something like that, because to me, it's, the NAB may see this as a competition that is similar to other non-AM/FM competitions, such as streaming services. And this will make the case more for the NAB to want complete elimination of national and for radio local market ownership caps, because that's really what they're shooting for. They're wanting all those ownership restrictions taken away. This is why I'm being very careful about proposing really anything commercial full service right now. If you look at what we did in MB Docket 03185 in the Franken FM proceeding, we included in our reply comment, in our comments, we included a special bonus, a proposed rulemaking concept for wide FM. And what we were looking at doing was, I'd come up with this very comprehensive plan to refarm TV channels 5 and 6, which is 76 to 88 megahertz, to add 60 additional channels to the FM broadcast band. And it was done in a way where it would protect the existing Channel 5 and Channel 6 full-service stations. And it was a great plan. And, obviously nobody wants to do it because, even though you can get the radios now in Brazil, you've always been able to get the radios in Japan. It's, who in this country is going to buy a new radio, one that tunes from 76 to 108? The reality, it looks good on paper, but when you really get down and you look at, at the way the overall industry of receiving audio entertainment has gone, and this need for instant gratification, and the fact that the radio stations no longer promote music like they used to. This is why a lot of people are veering away from radio, and why we need LPFM stations to do things that are unique and not be like every other commercial station. Run unique programming and give people a reason to want to turn the radio back on again. And this is what I tell the NAB. I said, look, you need the LPFM stations to keep the medium alive, because a lot of people have completely just shut themselves off to radio. And we got new generations that they think the radio is that's a boomer thing. I hear that, radio's a boomer thing, or it's a Gen X thing. I'm a Gen X myself, but radio's a Gen X thing, and it's just so you got your your Ys, your Zs, your alphas now. I mean, pretty soon we'll have our betas. I don't know, but we need people to rediscover radio, and in order to do that, we need compelling programming out there. We don't need another country station. We don't need another CHR station. We don't need another urban station. We need stations that are doing something unique but not commercially viable. And and if we do that more often, and we get and the programming is compelling enough where businesses are going to want to be associated with the station, and not to the point of where the underwriting will come in, and it will come in legitimately, and you won't have to resort to pushing the envelope or just going to full-blown commercials to get money from businesses, because the businesses are not going to want to come to your station. They're not coming there to advertise the mattress sale. They're coming there because your station is so sewn into the fabric of the community. People associate the station with the community. They associate the community with the station. That's the kind of audience, and that's the kind of station you want to get to. That's a goal. Because you get to that point, then you've got community involvement. You got a good thing going. So that's what you go for. Too many stations are getting involved in commercials, and they're getting busted for them. The stations that get busted, and I've said this before, stations that get busted have two things in common. Number one, they're running a commercially viable format. They're urban, they're country, they're AC, they're CHR, and just a flat music format. Not really much talk. Not much. It's a jukebox. Number two, they're in a smaller market. They're in a place where their competitor is a mom and pop. Maybe a mom and pop or a regional owner. Somebody like along the lines of a Saga. And so, when this station is coming in, this LPFM's coming in, and now they're selling time that they're not supposed to be selling, and they're cutting into that audience, they're cutting into that revenue. Of course you're going to piss off the local stations. They're going to record your air, and they're going to send it in. And then guess what? Ding, ding, ding. 5-figure forfeitures. And then having to explain once every 8 years why you got in trouble. You really want that? Anybody want that? No. And I hear people saying LPFM should be commercial. No. Because people who say LPFM should be commercial don't understand the law. They think it's just so easy. Okay, we'll just make them commercial. Well, you make them commercial, a few things get thrown out the window. The ownership limitations, one to an owner, gone. During filing windows, two applications that are mutually exclusive, okay, we're going to auction. Did one of those stations say they were a non-commercial organization? Okay, non-commercial's gone, the commercial gets granted. That's how it works. That's what happens when people ask for a commercial LPFM service. And that's why I positively do not support it. The Communications Act, Section 399, is very clear on what is a commercial. 399B, I should say. 399B is very clear on what is a commercial. And the Commission has done a great job over the years of interpreting that, and they've actually been very flexible with the, the 1986 Nature of Non-Commercial Educational Broadcasting, the infamous enhanced underwriting decision. That's the best you're going to get. Name, couple lines of business that the place is in, and access information. All that non-value added, a non-value added slogan, or if you're TV, a non-value added logogram. You know, if you can't work with that, and then you got to relook at your model. You got to relook at what you're doing. A lot of these stations, a lot of LPFM stations are going to fail because they come in with this dream of owning a radio. As usually like one or two people, I don't want to own a radio station. I just want to own a radio station. I don't care if it's non-commercial. I want to own a radio station. They come in, and then the sticker shock finally hits them. The cost of the towers. The delays. We're currently dealing with a tower delay. We're dealing with that similar delays right now. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that we are having cash flow issues right now because nobody is having REC do anything for them right now. Nobody's dropping in donations. We need that. That's what keeps us afloat here. That's what keeps the food on the table, and that's what keeps the lights on. So, so those are the things that we got to take into consideration. Is you gotta come into this. This is why the organizations that are successful are the very well-funded ministries. The ministries, the mega churches, the ones with the deep pockets. The ones that get a lot of they get a lot of listener support. Why? Because to a lot of folks, Christian radio is very essential in their lives. And to them, it's worth it to support the ministries. And you look at what used to be Educational Media Foundation, now Caleb. They are completely listener supported. They don't do underwriting. They don't do underwriting of commercial businesses. And yet, they're able to sponsor Sprint Cup Series NASCARs. So, just some things to think about there with that. Unless you're well resourced, you better be able to build this thing up. Otherwise, you're going to have to run it on the shoestring. And you got to take into consideration every year, you're going to have your ASCAP, your BMI, your CSAC. This is even if you don't stream. You stream, guess what? Your charge is almost triple. These are just some things to think about, people. Things to think about. Anyway. Okay. Good question on WHKA. I've been following that case. Now, they do. The problem is what they want to do. You just can't do that in rules. You have to do that through rulemaking. The WHKA story is it's an applicant in Connecticut. They're requesting a waiver because there's no channels available. None of the 100 channels are available. So they want to go on to 87.7, which I call channel 198. I'm sorry, channel 199. And so they're stating that, first of all, and then here's a nice thing, interesting thing is they actually reached out to a Channel 6 low-power TV station that would otherwise would otherwise inhibit there's a Channel 6 TV station that would otherwise inhibit any LP FM station on any of the top 20 channels to be at that location. And they actually got a letter of consent. And they actually did a contour study to show that the contour of the TV station did, that they didn't overlap and such like that. And the FCC said no. And they were right to say no in this case because this did not go through a rulemaking proceeding. Actually, there was a rulemaking proceeding somewhat related. It was actually brought up by NPR, and it was related to 87.9. This came up in the 03185 proceeding, and this is what sparked us to do the wide FM proposal, which would have been 82.1 to 87.9, it being added to the band. And the problem is that, obviously that there's never been any rulemaking on this. There's never been any service rules. There's never been any technical studies. I mean, REC, I did do technical studies for the wide FM, and we're using a lot of the ITU standards for doing the digital into analog and stuff like that. We came up with a whole entire technical criteria for doing, analog radio into, into digital television on a channel other than on a frequency other than like 87.7. Like somewhere in the middle of the band, like an 84 dot something. So they didn't go through the rulemaking proceedings. Also, the other thing that they failed to realize is that the location anywhere in Connecticut is going to be within 320 kilometers of the Canadian border. So not only do you have to deal with the American issues, but now you are dealing with now there's a separate level that involves Canadian interaction. Now, in cases like this, it may not be as simple as somebody saying in the FCC's Office of International Affairs, used to be called the International Bureau, getting on their phone to their counterpart at Industry Canada and saying, we'd like to drop this on 87.7 in Connecticut. Are you good? Yeah, we'll concur. Okay, great. Bye. That's not how it works. Something like that would probably require an international agreement. State Department would need to be involved. It would be a diplomatic thing. It's not just as simple as, because there's no prearranged agreement. And, there is no agreement to use FM sound broadcasting in that spectrum. Now, of course, now you're saying, how did the Franken FMs get away with it? Well, the Franken FMs, it's kind of a grandfathered thing because they were already doing analog television. And what's going on with this whole with the Franken FMs, it's an analog signal on 87.75, just like if it was a Channel 6 analog station. But instead of having your NTSC, your video, your color burst, your chroma, and all those different carriers, you now have a data block that goes from like 80, for Channel 6, it goes, from 82, right, the waveform just picks up right at 82, goes right over the, and is basically just a bzz all the way across, just a flat, big blob all the way across, and then it starts to come down about 87.5 or so. And then your 87.75 carrier is inserted in there, and the rest of the band is open until 88, until out of the band you're at 88.1. So that's how a Franken FM signal looks on a waveform. And so, Canada's already good with digital television on Channel 6. They're good with analog television on Channel 6. Franken FM is just a mix of the two. And it's already been, it's already been coordinated as a television station. Now the thing is, if they were to put that in Connecticut, then they would have to, they would probably say, okay, well then, these other areas are prevented from being able to put in a secondary television station. And that includes on the Canadian side. There will be more, to be reporting it. It's just, you can't do it without a formal international agreement. Simple as that. And, we talked about international agreements in the Wide FM proposal. We actually had, what we did in Wide FM was we divided up the band into two 30 channel segments. We had band 5, which was the channel 5 segment, 76 to 82, and we had the channel 6 segment from 82 to 88. And so we had 30 channels on each side, on each one. And then we even went further, and we did and we kind of split it even a little bit more. And we went into, these border priority zones where, the lower half of band 5, the 15 channels on the lower half of band 5 would be Canadian priority channels. The upper half would be U.S. priority channels, and we had specific rules regarding the placement of stations. And so bottom line is that, everybody would have an equal amount of spectrum at the border. And we did that for Mexico, too, in this proposal. And we could do that in this case because the space was wide open. And that's the nice part about this. Again, if you get a chance to look at that, we have that proposal somewhere on one of our sites. You check that out. Yeah, they said they spoke with Canadian officials. Wow, big deal. Yeah, somebody gives you it's like when you call staff at the FCC or you send them an email. You send an email. And this has happened, and people have gotten themselves into trouble for doing this in the long run. You send an email or you talk to somebody at staff. It's just, kind of like off the record. Can I do this? Are you allowed to do this? If they give you information and then you do it, and then the application gets dismissed, you can't go back to them and say, but so-and-so in the audio division said we can do this. No. It's not binding. Well, when I say grandfathered, I'm really meaning is the concept of the channel assignment being there. Because what happened was that when the FCC, part of 03185 was debating the permanence of the Franken FM stations, was debating the permanence of whether we were going to allow these hybrid stations on Channel 6 that run, 4.5 megahertz of ATSC3 bandwidth, and then the upper piece is being used for an FM carrier. That was the debate. And, prior to that, and, from the time of the analog shutdown, and the FCC started to give out experimental licenses, experimental permits to these LPFMs, to these LPTVs, experimental authorities to operate in this hybrid mode. And that's how it went until 03185. And then in 03185, the FCC said, okay, we're going to allow these 13 stations to remain in this mode and operate them permanently like that. They're going to be subject to some radio rules. They're going to be subject to some new rules, but they can run these stations. We're going to add a 14th one, WVOA TV, or actually WVOA LD. They'll be added because they originally were going to do it, and then they got caught up in Canadian coordination issues. Those are the only 14 that'll ever get it. They're grandfathered in. The FCC is not allowing any more Channel 6s to go into Frankie mode. And part of what Wide FM called for was not for the elimination of was not necessarily the elimination of LPTV stations on 5 and 6. It was allowing 20 channels of spectrum, 20 of those 60 channels, to be used for non-commercial educational. Again, we're going non-commercial educational, so this way we prevent the ownership issues, the ownership limit issues, and stuff like that. So we're proposing 20 new. We proposed 20 new channels, basically saying, hey, our country's become more diverse. There's new ethnic groups that weren't here before. A lot of different ethnic groups and others have been underrepresented in radio, and this is a time for for non-commercial broadcasting to expand. And that was one of our bases for doing the Wide FM. So but the idea was that there would be a lot of places in the country where only one of the two channels could be used, either Channel 5 or Channel 6. We had Zone 1, Zone 2, and Zone 3. We had Channel 5 exclusion zones, Channel 6 exclusion zones. Actually, where I'm at right now is both a Channel 5 and 6 exclusion zone, because I've got Channel 6 in Philadelphia, I got Channel 5 in Dover, Delaware. And I wouldn't be, and we wouldn't be able to have a full power Wide FM facility if our service ever was to get approved. We would never have that on the Delmarva Peninsula as long as the full power stations on Channel 5 and Channel 6 in Dover and Philadelphia are still on the air. So, it is kind of a grandfathered situation in the case of the Frankies. Because, again, the FCC is not allowing any more of them. And they've been very resistant to doing it. And I agree. I mean, I'm tolerating the ones that are there. We all wanted to see them go away. A lot of people, even the NAB, wanted to see them go away. And fortunately, unlike the old technology, unlike the totally analog television stations, they're able to actually use their spectrum to its fullest capability, to a fuller capability. Where before, they only ran the audio, and on the video, they might have had a slide, or in the case that we've seen in a lot of cases during the time when there were more Franken FMs around, they would just not turn on the video carrier at all, back in the analog days. We saw a lot of that happen. So there we go. Now we went from 2 hours, now we're at 2.5. And I know we've been, people have been boarding and departing this bus the whole entire time. I do appreciate everybody coming on, because it's always good to come on and talk about things. Obviously we've gone all the way from broadcasting into Banana Ball, into into the big beautiful bill stuff and HR1 and all that. We covered a lot of ground today, and a lot of Michi rambling, because that's what I like to do. I'd like to sit down and just have a good talk. So this is it. Very last call. Very last call. My finger is on the mouse. It was clever and quirky. Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. It was clever and quirky. Unfortunately, it wasn't planned too well. I filed in the 2021 window. I filed an application to use 89.9 here in Riverton for a 250 watt NCE station. And what I claimed was I was wanting this waiver done. And I created this really, and the waiver was based on first services for underserved rural communities. But the thing was that prior to filing that application in the window, about a year or two before that, I filed a petition for rulemaking think it was RM11843. That did, that basically used the same theories, the same criteria, the same theories, the same rules. It got an RM number. It collected comments. One thing the FCC doesn't want to do is they don't want to change something if they don't have comments to do it. That's why sometimes you see the FCC say, look, so-and-so is asking for a waiver. We're collecting comments. Administrative Procedures Act requires that. So we, and out of all the weird waivers, because there were other kinds of weird waivers out there, kind of like this HK waiver is a weird waiver in the same way. We were the last ones. The staff was sitting on that one for so long. And then the LPFM window came up. But also, too, we had our second adjacent station, WSCL. They wanted to do a modification. And I guess there was a worry that our full-service application on the second adjacent channel was holding them back. And, my attitude is, no, like I said in the application, I said, we want a per se condition on there. And, which is what they normally do with Raleigh waivers going the other way, which means that the other station would not be impacted and they could move as much as they want. Because, to me, second adjacent interference is a farce. It's, it's right up there with, flat earth, the moon being made of green cheese, second adjacent interference really existing in the modern age. So it's right along those lines. But yeah, it was a clever application. Unfortunately, it was misguided, and it did not really seriously take into consideration the issues such as the Canada issue. If that was to come into my shop, say they were to contact me first, number one, I would have talked them out of it from that location. If they were more than 320 kilometers from the border, and they were strictly outside the U.S. and Mexico border zones, I'd say give it a try. The worst they could do is say no. But, that's also what they did there. They gave it a try. The worst they could do is say no. So, either way, but your chances would probably be better if it was, the one thing that got them right off the top was the border issue. And the lack of international agreement that covers FM sound broadcasting below 88. So, yeah, that's where we're at there. Final call. Final call for the Michi. Final call for alcohol. We go 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, everyone. Yeah, Canada is like, for TV, it's like in the 400s. The TV and radio agreements are different for Canada as far as the distance for the border zones go. All right, everyone. I'm going to say sayonara, and we'll see you another time here. Hopefully a little better organized, but I just decided to do this one on a whim.